Petrus, and welcome to WorldView. WorldView is a podcast where we explore everyone's perspectives on all things that can broaden our worldview. If you've watched some of our content and liked it, please consider liking this video, subscribing, and donating on Patreon. Today, we're talking with Ramon Alexander. Ramon is considered a leading exponent of Cape jazz. As a pianist, he has performed with a few legends like Japanese trumpeter Terumasa Hino and veteran drummer Jack Momple. His ensemble has performed at numerous local and international music festivals, notably the Cape Town International Jazz Festival and the No Black Tie Jazz Club in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia in 2019. Ramon, welcome to the show.
Hello, Petrus. Thank you for having me.
We just want to first start off and just ask, the basic questions, getting to know you a bit better. How did you get involved in music?
Well, music obviously has been an integral part of our family. It's been in our house since I opened my eyes. My dad, for instance, he was a huge Elvis Presley fan, and obviously in the mix, my mother also listened to some opera like Nana Mouskouri, and and my dad was the dominant music listener in the house. So my ears got attuned to music at a very early age. And my older brother, we are three brothers, 5 siblings. My older brother, he when he practiced his piano lessons, because we grew up in a small town called Bamre, and it was it's quite uncommon to hear people in Bamre at that time taking piano lessons. So I was very intrigued with what he learned and how he practiced, and I was very curious. I was hanging around the piano all the time, so obviously that was a major deciding factor for me,
And I mean, as a a young child, I'm assuming you maybe like pressed some of the keys while he was practicing. Like, did he like it or not, or what was that relationship like?
Actually, I only remember the pleasant memories, where he said, like, come sit here and I'll show you this, so I mean, he was never like he felt invaded by me. That's what I can remember that.
Well, that's awesome. It's such an incredibly welcoming environment. I also have family members that also, sat and practiced and had to do it all day, and it was a lot of discipline and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, inviting me into that family as well. I used to play trumpet. Just, it's a great environment, and I love jazz personally. Okay. But back on you. I want to know, what were your inspirations? What made you go into jazz? Was your father also jazz, or was it more?
No, my father actually hated jazz.
Oh, really?
I don't think my father ever came to a concert of mine, even in my adult days. So I also grew up with, when I started playing piano, I started in the conventional sort of classical lessons, so I took lessons in Mossel Bay, and then that was when I was about 8 years old or so. And moving along to when I was about 15 years old, I remember going to Grahamstown with my brother, the piano playing one. He loved jazz, so by the way. And I remember we went to this one concert at the Monument Theatre in Grahamstown, now Makanda, of course. And I was blown away by especially what the piano player did in this. It was a Cuban band called, I remember it very well, called Como No. And I don't know what it means, but the piano player intrigued me. And for someone who hated jazz at that time, I got hooked at that point specifically. Yeah.
And it was just a passion point from that point on forward. Is it the relaxed music style, or what about jazz specifically attracted you?
Oh, I'm not really sure, but if I had to guess, it was because at that point in time, without me knowing it, I had an aptitude for playing lighter music, So I was playing songs from the radio. I was browsing through my brother's music books. He had a book of 70s music and 80s music, all the hits and stuff. So I learned that stuff eventually. And that also was the time when I started playing by ear. You know, for a classical musician at the time, it was something quite challenging to do. So at that specific time, I was interested in, like I said, transcribing songs off the radio and playing it for my own enjoyment.
What was your main format of consuming music? Was it you know, concerts, or was it, you know, tape, or where exactly where did you hear most of your music that you
So
played
you
it off
want,
of ear from?
yeah. So you want me to give away my age now? Well, when I was
I'm being
about
very vague.
5 years old, I remember receiving my first music gift. You know, it was a tape by a group called Modern Talking. I don't know if you remember them.
No.
Yeah, so that was my first, you know, the music I owned. And obviously, when I started my classical music, I was very into specifically piano classical music. So I remember my mom ordered, she was a subscriber to the Reader's Digest, and you could order some tapes from them. And I remember this tape set of 4 tapes of just piano classical music. And I think that was a big part in shaping my love for piano specifically. And obviously later on, when I discovered jazz, I was very into the music of Keith Jarrett, you know.
Yes.
And much later on, about, you know, in my almost 30s, I became very interested in what you might have picked up in Cape jazz. So so I realized there's a lot of treasure right here on our own soil, you know. So
And very much so. Yeah, definitely.
yeah.
I mean, you've since you're interested in Cape Jazz, and then obviously performed in Cape Jazz, you've performed at quite a few places. I mean, we only mentioned 2 of them, as the Cape Town International Jazz Festival, and then of course an international one at the No Black Tie Jazz Club in Kuala Lumpur. But you know, more generally, perhaps could you give us some insight as to like where you've performed, and you know, perhaps what were your least favorite or most favorite venues? Do you have any upcoming shows that you're excited about particularly?
You know what? People have this perception of me that I'm a very well-traveled musician, which I'm actually not. I've been overseas a couple of times, mostly to the Southeast Asia. I've also performed at the Borneo Jazz Festival. I don't know if you know Borneo. It's
Yes,
like the
yeah, it's awesome.
biggest. It's where the Sultan of Brunei stays,
Yes,
apparently.
yeah.
Anyway, so I was lucky enough to go there a couple of years back, and I would say that my actual highlights is actually playing more with local people, and it will remain that for time to come. Even I think I will travel the world eventually. And I'm very proud of being from here, because we have a big, rich legacy here. And you asked me also my favorite places to perform. I've always aspired to playing at major jazz festivals, you know, as opposed to jazz clubs or crowded venues with people who are noisy and not really paying attention to your music. So I won't mention any names about my least favorite places where I've played. So any place that is noisy and unappreciative of the music is my least favorite, and there are a couple of them around. Yeah. So at the moment, I'm not performing much, obviously, because of
difficult, yeah.
the pandemic. But I've been lucky enough to be approached by Stellenbosch University to teach in their piano department at the moment. You know, it's a newish course that I'm
Mm.
presenting. Obviously, it's the first time that they are dabbling into jazz.
Mm.
So I've been lucky to be approached by them at the moment. So I haven't been playing much, but I've been involved with music. You know, a nice unforeseen blessing of being a teacher is that you learn almost as much as your students.
Right.
You know, so yeah.
So I mean, having taught at how have you taught much at Stellenbosch yet, or is this a new appointment?
Well, from 2005, I think, till 2012, I was in the certificate program at the university. I taught there for, I don't know how many years, I think it's 8 or 9 years. But I've recently been approached last year to teach a few undergrad subjects. So, which is great because now I have the opportunity from this year on to study my master's in, I don't know, in musicology or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm very happy about it because as you might have read, I've got a science background. So I've got a BSc in viticulture and enology. So I've been really, I'm grateful for the recognition of prior learning, as they call it, to be accepted in my current course that I'm pursuing now. You know.
Yeah. But it's definitely a passion of yours. So perhaps teaching in jazz and being a pianist there is actually, you know, more interesting or more exciting to you rather. Although we found there's amazing, interesting connection between the sciences and of course the musics.
I haven't discovered that yet.
Okay, that's interesting.
Well, yeah. But I suppose there is, yeah. You know, in terms of music is at the top of my head. I suppose it's quite mathematical in a sense. And also, I can see the connection between wine and music and women, for instance. There's that chemistry.
Definitely.
Yeah, but other than that, you know, for me, it's two different worlds. I mean, I decided while I was studying my BSc, I knew I wasn't going to be a winemaker. Well, towards the end, at least, because I wasn't nearly as passionate as my peers about the subject as I am, for instance, about music and what I'm doing right now. So I just knew it. You can't go through life without being really passionate about anything, you know. So
definitely,
music was my natural choice. Yeah.
So you've obviously, you know, you say you're not well toured, but you've definitely been around places, and you've met some amazing characters. We mentioned in the introduction the Japanese trumpeter Terumasa Hino and Jack Momple. Do you have any, like, besides them perhaps, but you know, do you have any interesting stories to convey of you know, some exciting of thrilling or fun moments that happened at jazz festivals or tours or any of those performances?
Well, for me, I mean, I was very afraid of the question because I don't have funny stories or anything. Maybe some cool moments for me. Maybe I can share that. And I've thought of, I mean, there's a couple. You know, I remember the day I met Abdullah Ibrahim. He touched me on my shoulder and he said, "Oh, nice playing, son." And I remember going to Malaysia to know Black Tie, and the promoter who told me about Terumasa, who was in town playing golf, and he'd like to come see the South African piano player because Terumasa apparently was here a couple of years ago, and you know, it was nice for him to connect to the country somehow and sit in on a couple of songs with me at No Black Tie. And also, if I can remember, I remember the thrilling time when I met Errol Dyers also, because he's been a childhood hero of mine since I finished high school. You know, or I remember matric. I used to listen to his debut album called Sunesta. I used to put it on repeat, and yeah, I just loved it. That album of his, and yeah, was, I don't know, almost 20 years later, I got the chance to actually meet him and actually work with him, and we recorded an album called Musical Democracy for Mountain Records, and it was like a nice, almost full circle moment for me. And there's one more thing that I remember fondly. I remember my first time at the Cape Town International Jazz Festival. That was 5 years ago. And I remember going into one of our or should I say our venue was a big Moses Molalekwa ballroom hall in the Cape Town Convention Center. And I remember at the beginning of the show, I looked to my right because that's where the audience was. I was sitting in front of the piano, looked, and then in the first 2 rows, there were scattered people, and they were the only ones in the I would say this venue, and it was all people I knew, my friends and my family. And I think when I finished the first song, it was time to address the audience, and I looked and I saw a sea of people, and I was like, wow, what the hell is this? A packed ballroom venue, you know, and that was like something that, obviously that's something that I will always remember.
Yeah. So it was actually, you know, just friends and family supporting you at your performance, and then through the course of the first song, it got packed.
It got packed.
So you literally attracted people with your music.
Maybe. Well, I'd like to think so.
Yeah. Well, definitely. I mean, it definitely sounds that way. I mean, that has to be an exhilarating feeling, and you know, being appreciated. And doesn't it? Did you get nervous though, in like for a performance, or are you used to it by now? Especially like meeting some of your heroes, or that scenario where you turn around and suddenly there's a ton of people. It's like, do you ever get nervous as performances?
Well, firstly, I would say I'm not like a starstruck person. For me, I don't know. I never had aspirations of playing with this one or that one. I'd rather was very into the thought of me becoming a composer, band leader. You know, so in that regard, I don't get nervous. But when I perform in front of a sea of people, which, you know, can be daunting, I don't get nervous. Or should I say, I do get nervous, but I just tell myself, you go with it. And whatever happens in the moment, that's what's going to add value to your performance.
Yeah. As you said that you saw yourself always more, or rather your aspirations more, as a composer or a band leader.
Yes.
In terms of, I'm not exactly sure on your background there. It's like, have you performed as a band leader, or perhaps, you know, composed? Is there some of the famous songs you could mention? Not famous rather, but one of your favorites?
Well, as a band leader, I've been, I've performed a couple of times at numerous festivals in and around South Africa. And obviously, you mentioned the No Black Tie. I was the primary artist, and I was hooked up with some of Asia's finest jazz musicians at the time. So I think my most requested song is a tune called Sons and Captains. It's like, and I say it because it's tried and tested. You know, there were times where I said to my band, "I mean, I'm so duck over that song, you know." So let's not play this song tonight. You know, there are other songs that I wrote, you know, which I think is just as good. And when I finish the performance, there's always this chant, you know, when are you going to play that song for us? Sons and Captains is a song. Yeah. So that's my most requested song, I'd say.
Yeah. We'll be definitely to add that at the end as an outro with your
Oh,
blessing, of course,
sure.
if that's all right. If you're not too sick of it already, you want to see it at the end of your interview as well.
Well, you see, the rest of the world, they haven't heard it, so obviously I'd welcome it.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, no, definitely.
Yeah.
So I just want to say it's actually really interesting that the places that you've been, it sounds like it's relatively centered around Southeast Asia. We mentioned obviously Kuala Lumpur and we mentioned Brunei, and so is there a specific connotation between those countries and jazz that is popular there? I'm not sure about the history.
Well, yes, the Creole people from the Cape,
Mm,
we have most of our roots. Um, um, well, most of us have Asian roots, and I believe that
of course.
Asian roots come from that specific part of Asia. And if you look at the typical Creole South African person, we basically three continents in one being. So that part is a very important part. I think the Cape Malay influence in the Cape is very prevalent. You know, so so I suppose there is a connection between the music of the Cape and Asia. Yes, I remember the jazz festival that we performed at in Borneo was actually not just any jazz festival. It was specifically, it was called as an ethno jazz
Okay.
festival, which means they invited a lot of groups with music that is drenched in their culture.
Mm,
So obviously, I think Cape Jazz fits that bill.
mm,
Because it's a uniquely South African experience.
mm.
So and there were people from Japan and parts of Europe, and from the Americas, and so yeah, so
Do you at
that was the main attraction of us going there.
Mm. Do you at all adjust the music, the setting, the personality of jazz, depending on which audience you have, which people you have? Because it sounds like at this particular festival, everybody was there and they appreciated all the different types of jazz. So
Mhm.
perhaps is there no adjustment necessary? Is it universal?
Well, I think it depends on the tour you are on.
Mm,
I think and the people you're playing for. But I think as a composer, band leader, you want to be yourself wherever you go into the world.
mm,
You want to tell people who you are and where you come from, and also a small part. Also, you want to show people what shaped you.
mm,
And if you're in America, maybe it's a small percentage of your product could be American jazz, just as a little ode, or
right.
say thanks to the world of jazz, for shaping me and allowing me to become whatever I've become. So but in general, I only play South African music, specifically Cape composed music,
Yeah.
from composers from Cape Town, because most of these people are actually my friends, and I know them well, and I know they should have been in better places where they are,
Yeah.
in terms of their well-being and their financial state, etc., etc. And it just makes more sense for me to go to a festival and play, for instance, Ibrahim Khalil Shihab's songs, because I know him, I know his situation, and maybe put some money in his pocket instead of playing American music and making them more rich.
Yeah. Even
You
richer.
know,
Yeah. No, definitely. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And you also want to adjust to, I mean, like you said, you want to let people know where you come from. You want to know what's special about your performance and your history and your talents as well. And I feel like that's probably more worth, because if they want American jazz, they can go to America. If they want Indian jazz, they can go to India. But your type of jazz is your type of jazz. Like there's a fingerprint on that. Nobody else can do it. So yeah, that's really, really cool. And what's your creative process like in terms of how do you go about creating your music? You've mentioned that it's got roots in what you know, and it's affected by your friends and family to come and watch it. But what's your general process like?
Well, in a nutshell, if you could see my hands, it's the origins of the music is somewhere between the brain and the heart, of what you know cerebrally and what you feel as a human being. So I think it's always a balance between. It's always somewhere between there. Sometimes you are inspired by something that you hear musically. Obviously, a lot of times, most of the time, music does not come from music at all. It is a result of life, love, loss, relationships, etc. So and like I said, music comes from all those corners. I believe that. I've experienced the music that I've composed and shaped in my head over a very long time, a couple of months, almost a year. And then there were times where I woke up with something in my head and I just wrote it down in 10 minutes and it's complete. So in a nutshell, that's the process. Inspiration can have all sorts of forms, a flower, a sound, a taste in your mouth.
Yeah. And teaching with your students at Stellenbosch, I mean, obviously you have an academic element there where you're trying to teach, the stuff that you said, the cerebral stuff, the stuff that you're teaching that. But at the same time, all these people have their own lives, their own personalities. So as that also, I'm assuming that's also definitely shaped the way that you write music or the things that you're passionate about?
Yeah, well, I believe that music is just another extension of who you are in terms of your character. So and I believe that music should be a mirror of the character. You should be as honest as you can when you present music, so, and because all that stuff has value, because people relate to humanity, the human factor. And I think that is the valuable thing that I try to teach my students. If you are a disrespectful, ill-disciplined person, it will come through your music, but so will the good. If you have respect and discipline and love, I think that that will be reflected in your music. So yeah. So basically, when I teach jazz to my students, I basically teach them about life.
Yeah.
I'm not the facts and figures type of teacher.
Yeah.
In that sense,
Yeah. Do you feel, because I mean, obviously jazz has this component where it's the soul of the music comes from the person, comes from life, as you've mentioned, and there's definitely other genres of music that do the same thing. It's integrally connected with the way that you make music, but there is a feeling, and this is something that I just want to know personally. There's a feeling that some of the more pop and or rather the stuff that you hear about, even though you don't want to hear about it in terms of YouTube and social media, is kind of like mass produced for its popularity, and it's extremely popular for a very short time and then falls off again. It doesn't become a classic. Do you feel like there's perhaps a type of a industry churning out machine type of generating pop music that's lost its soul, or do you feel like every person is different, and that's, if you don't understand that necessarily, you don't understand the person necessarily, which is okay, because different music has different forms.
Yeah, man, it's the same with anything in life. If you can make blockbuster movies for this summer, and then you can make Oscar-winning classics, and it's all about. There's a place for everything, and there's a need in one person for all of that stuff. I believe so. I don't like to pass on judgments on commercial music or that type of thing, because like I said, there's a place for everybody under the sun, and there's a thing for everybody to enjoy.
Mm. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree with that as well. It's great to hear, and it's a mutual respect among musicians, even though we might have different tastes. So
sure.
we've also known that you've been part of a couple of outreach programs. Could you mention a couple of those and what they're centered around in terms of your motivation?
Well, I've been, you know, in our communities, I've tried to give back somehow. You know, if I just can remember the top of my head, I used to. I sort of still am. I'm part of the Stellenbosch University outreach program, in a sense, because part of what they do is they go and they have this university jazz band, and they go out to schools and underprivileged communities and show them the possibilities of a brighter future through music. And yeah, so I've always been part of that, and there's a couple of students that I've mentored in the Southern Cape. You know, I've got a friend who's a very good teacher friend of mine who's doing wonderful work in the Southern Cape, and that has become sort of a feed for us at the moment at the university. And obviously, very dear to my heart, there's this group from Pontiero called the Jazz Yard Academy. And also, there was an attempt, you know, and a successful attempt to keep young people off the streets and getting involved in crime and all sorts of evil. Yeah. So yeah, and yeah, so that's my three main avenues of community work and outreach. I can't hear you.
Oh, sorry, that's my bad.
Yeah.
Music has this amazing quality that you can almost channel energy that would otherwise be used for wasted energy. I want to put it that way. I don't want to classify anything, but wasted energy you can actually channel into something that's beautiful and bringing people together. And so in that sense, it actually is a fantastic outreach program, especially in terms of youth and keeping them off the streets, especially if they have very little else to keep themselves busy with. So yeah, that's a really, really cool outreach program. And that's obviously been a bit more difficult, I'm assuming, to do in lockdown because you can't visit these people. And I'm assuming that's challenges as well. But at the same time, we've had the Libertas Choir is an amazing example of how you can effectively digitize music.
Outreach,
and then outreach program through that, where everybody's literally in their own home, and you just have this amazing choir that work perfectly together, and have somebody that edits it together, which I'm sure is a lot of effort. But you've also seen international examples of people singing like a bunch of songs together as a cappella. So how have you adjusted to lockdown and in the pandemic and continued your passion for music, reaching out rather?
Well, what I've been doing during lockdown is I spent a lot of time at my instrument again, practicing and going back to the drawing board. Like I said, I'm a teacher. You can't teach things to students if you don't know yourself what the hell's going on.
Yeah.
So I've been sort of sharpening that tool of mine. And obviously, it's been long overdue, but it's been 5 years almost since I released an album. So I'm in the process of finishing up the album. I've recorded the bulk of it over the last year or two. So yeah.
Do you have a timeline on when that's coming out?
Oh,
or
no. Okay. This time I'm not too. I'm not too anal about it.
Yeah. And do you have a name for it? Because we just kind of want to,
Well, I'm just
let people know about
throwing some names around at the moment in my head, but the one that's been stuck there, it's called T's and C's Apply, Terms and Conditions Apply. Yeah. So that's my album. I don't know why I call it that. It's just a cool name in my head. And I think, yeah.
We want to make sure that we're able to, in some way plug that so that when it does come out, people know about it. because I think it'll be. I'm
Yeah.
excited for it after having talked to you.
Cool, man.
I just want to say, lastly, you mentioned that your favorite song, or the favorite one that if you've written and obviously a fan favorite, is Sons and Captains. Could you just give a general idea of how that came about, and did you expect it to become your most popular song, or most requested one, rather?
It's one of those songs that I just wrote in. It just came to me one morning, and I remember sitting in our house with my girlfriend, roaming around here, and she always tells a story. When she heard this, I was like fiddling around with this tune. She knew there's something coming up, and this was on the eve of me recording my last album called Echoes from Low School. So when we got to the studio, we had a hell of a morning, very grueling, tiring morning. And I said to the guys, listen here, it's time to take a break. But I didn't mean like a tea break or whatever. I just meant we're going to give our brains a little bit of a breather. So I went to my backpack and I pulled out a couple of charts. And it was the chart of Sons and Captains, which I prepared, I think, the previous evening.
Yeah.
So I just put the stuff in front of the guys. They said, we're going to play this now, and I knew it was something that the guys could hack, like one time. And we did. And we recorded it, 1 take, 2 takes, and it was done. I didn't know that people would like it, but I knew there was something special about it. Maybe it's because of the simplicity and the sort of singability of it and the Kuma groove, whatever.
Yes.
I'm not too sure. That's all just speculation, of course. But yeah, so what you hear on the recording is the people basically playing it for the first time without having heard it before.
Yeah.
So that's the special thing about it,
Yeah. That's amazing, because we have the perspective of people that don't really know necessarily what exactly happens in a studio. That it's a scenario where it's like in my perspective, it's like making a movie. You have to do 10 takes or something, and then sometimes you mess up. The times that I played in an ensemble, we most definitely didn't get it right the first time. So is there a comfort about it? Is it the simplicity? What's the magic in recording something that like okay, this is ready to be eternalized in digital form?
Yeah. Yeah, the thing is about jazz, the best jazz, in my opinion, happens in real time. So if you can capture something that is in real time, that happens in the moment, there's no editing, there's no overdubbing, or at least little, not more than a little, then that's what you want, and obviously that's just one type of production technique or approach. Sometimes you want to do something a little bit more slick and produce, etc., etc. And like I said before, there's a need and a place for everything. So yeah, and also in my ensemble specifically, when you write, you know who you write for. You know what I'm saying? So it's when you write, it's almost tailor-made for the players in the group. So you are sort of guaranteed success in that sense.
Yeah. You trust them. You know what they're like. You've played along with them so long. You know what their soul is and the way that they interpret music. So that do you just push them in the right direction? Is the music completely written, or do you know that they'll interpret it in the way that you intended to because you just have played along as much?
Yeah, well, you can only sort of govern the outcome at a certain level, but a lot of the times you just let them do the magic. Often what you in your head is not as good as what comes out when you have a group of people doing the magic. So and obviously then you write songs where this is the structure. It's always going to be this long. It's always going to be this tempo, etc., etc. But in my music, that happens very little. So
it's very natural. We just want to, lastly, I just want to say thank you so much for having to talk to you about it. This is something that I'm also passionate about. I want to give you a last chance to say anything or plug anything you'd like to.
Wow, I just want to say thank you for having me on this edition of what's it called, WorldView.
Yes.
Yeah, man. Go WorldView.
Yes,
thank you very much, and I feel very privileged and honored to be here. Thank you very much, Beatrice and Mr. Brown.
Yeah, well, the honor is ours. We'll make sure to let you know when it all comes together, and we'd like to know also about when your album comes together. So we'll be sure to add any of the things that you've talked about in the description below of the video. And of course, to our viewers, we just want to say thank you so much for watching. If you've made it thus far on the video, you most definitely liked it. So if you want to share this perspective to broaden everybody else's worldview, please, by all means, like, share, and subscribe. It helps out not only the channel, but also exposing people to different perspectives, particularly.
Cool.
And of course, nothing is easy in life. You got to get paid to do anything. So, we also have a platform called Patreon, which supports the platform through monthly, willing, completely optional donations. If you're willing to subscribe to that, it also helps to get better equipment. You reach more places and people, of course. So this has been WorldView. Thank you so much for watching.